A thriller of the quarterfinal round in Milano Cortina as 3 out of the 4 games went to overtime. And in one of the games, the Florida Panthers Finns had their fingerprints on it.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Thursday, February 19th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the nation's #1 sports podcasting network, and it is your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at MondoMan12. Follow the show anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. And shout out to everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. And download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off of your first purchase. You can do that all on Game Time. So Panther fans, Olympic hockey fans, whether you're American, Canadian, Slovak, or Finnish, welcome to the show. Very excited to come to you today to discuss everything in the world of the Florida Panthers and the 2026 Winter Olympics from Milano Cortina, as we got a heck of a thriller on Wednesday and then continuing on with the gold medal game between USA versus Canada, as USA came out with the 2-1 victory in overtime. Hillary Knight scoring with the extra attacker, and then Megan Keller in overtime to give the United States their first gold medal in women's hockey since 2018. And in yesterday's action, 3 out of the 4 games went to overtime, and we saw thrillers and game winners from Arturi Lankinen, Mitch Marner, and then Quinn Hughes. And absolute cinema that we saw. And with the men's tournament, with the top 4 teams who are going to be playing for a medal now, it's the same 4 teams that we saw in the 2010 Winter Olympics from Vancouver. Incredible how, for me personally, it's a full circle moment for yours truly, because that's kind of when I started my hockey journey in becoming a fan of this sport and falling in love with it. And now here I am 16 years later, and it's happening all over again. Except Canada faced Slovakia in the semifinal, and USA faced Finland, as USA won 6-1, and then Canada defeated Slovakia 3-2. So in that one. And for this one, no shortage of drama, unlike what we saw in the play-in round, where all the higher seeds won in the play-in, but in the semifinal, all the teams who had rest, who were not playing on the back-to-back, still won, but it did not come without the drama, which is great considering everything that when it came to USA's slow start, and also with Finland and how tight they play, and because it's a Florida Panther show, we're going to start with Finland and Switzerland's game, where they won 3-2 in overtime against Switzerland, and Florida Panthers had their fingerprints all over the comeback, where this was going on simultaneously as the Canada-Czechia game. And the Canada-Czechia game ended in the middle of the second period of Finland-Switzerland. So it's really hard to really put your full focus on 2 games at once after everything that happened in the previous game. But in this game, 2 goals by Switzerland, 1 minute and 12 seconds apart. And one of the criticisms that I had of Switzerland was their inability to get the insurance goal on Italy to really, truly be in control and really, truly put it away. And yeah, Switzerland, running 12 forwards and 8 defense in the game versus the 13 and 7 because of the fact that they were missing 2 forwards in Kevin Fiala and then Dennis Malgin, that he once again didn't play in that game. And also the fact that this game was kept to 5-on-5 throughout the entirety of the second period. And I know I said the Florida Panthers had their fingerprints, but there was also a moment where there could have been disaster for one of the Florida Panthers players in Eetu Luostarinen, not once, but twice in this game. The first one, where he got called for boarding Nico Hischier, and he got sent to the box. And at first glance, I was thinking, oh no, this possibly could be ejection worthy and a game misconduct here. And thankfully, he only got the 2-minute minor. Finland was able to kill off the penalty, and then shortly after, Finland was back on the power play, and Switzerland, like I said, couldn't put Italy away earlier, even though they won. Failed to do so with 2 shorthanded chances in this game, especially one where it was gifted to them by a drop pass from Mikko Rantanen in their own D zone while on the power play. Miro Heiskanen does not know that Rantanen is attempting to give him the puck, and then they go on a short breakaway opportunity where thankfully UC Saros was able to make a stop, where UC Saros has come up big as this tournament has gone on. So credit to him on getting the stops, and credit to Finland for keeping the puck in their own in the O zone when they had the extra attacker. Where I said that he had the boarding call for Luostarinen, but also in overtime lost an edge, and then a 3-on-2 develops. But another Florida Panther came to Eetu Luostarinen's defense, literally, in Nico Mikkola. It looked like that he's behind on the play, closes the gap, gets a nice stick check, and then Switzerland doesn't get a single shot on goal in that sequence. And then Eetu Luostarinen got the primary assist on the first goal by Sebastian Aho. He beats Giannoni far side, and it's a 2-1 game with 6 minutes left. 6:06 to be exact. And then Miro Heiskanen puts it in the right place off of Switzerland Jonas Siegenthaler's stick, and boom, a tie game. It's a whole new hockey game. And then it gets into overtime, and then a nice little stretch from Anton Lundell to Arturi Lehkonen, where Switzerland was very spread out. They had the gut right open, and Arturi Lehkonen on a breakaway beats Giannoni. Finland advances to the quarterfinals. And Arturi Lehkonen, put some respect on his name. He's not the biggest profile name in Colorado because of the McKinnons, the Makars, the Valery Nichushkins, the Gabriel Landeskog's, the Devontaes. And he comes clutch time after time. He did it in Montreal in the year that they made the Stanley Cup final in 2021 in the bubble. The very next year, he was a trade deadline acquisition from Colorado. And he comes up big. Loses the final 1 year. Personal redemption for him. And now there's a chance for him to go for a gold medal for Arturi Lehkonen. So congratulations to him. And congratulations to the Panthers Finns, who were all over it. Especially the Condor on Sven Andrighetto. That was absolute dog of skating and gap closure that we saw from Nico Mikkola. That was probably the play of the game that in my opinion, even though there were 3 goals to discuss here. And now Finland faces a big test in Canada, where Antti Pennanen was asked, what's the best way to stop Connor McDavid? And he said, I don't know, I got to call Alexander Barkov to see how we do that, since Alexander Barkov was able to do that in 2 straight Stanley Cup finals and raise the Stanley Cup in 2 straight years. And it's sad to see that we won't be able to see that in 2026 in a different stage than what we've seen at the club level. I would argue that on the international level, McDavid does have the edge, but on the club level, hey, at least as Florida Panther fans, we're happy to see that Barkov came out victorious both times in those matchups. But Finland had to wait for their opponent with the USA Sweden game. They had to still wait, but it should be a fun game, as that game will be at 10:40 Eastern time on Friday morning here in the States. But let's talk about their opponent in the quarterfinals, who also had a thriller themselves against Czechia. We'll discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like being in an NBA arena. The crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why Game Time has become my go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage where it belongs, with the fans. Pulled up the Game Time app, picked an NBA game, and had tickets locked in within minutes. I love seeing the all-in prices up front, no surprise fees at checkout, and being able to see the view from the seat before buying made the decision easy. Zone deal stood out, chose a section, Game Time picked the seat, and you save. Great last-minute options, too. With NBA tickets showing up at solid prices, everything feels quick, intuitive, and stress-free from start to finish. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off of your first purchase. That's LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Remember, it's GameTime.co, not .com. Segment number 2 here on this Thursday, February 19th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Thursday. And another thriller. Canada defeating Czechia by a final score of 4-3, where Mitch Marner got the overtime winner. And a lot of people just laughing, including yours truly, where Roberto Luongo tweeting out Mitch Marner was made to wear the Maple Leafs Twitter account with the Canadian flag and the magic wand, talking about Marner Magic, but not saying his name. And then Brad Marchand after the game saying that he knew that Mitch Marner was a big game player to Jackie Redmond, and the sarcasm and the trolling that came with that from his days in Boston and then eventually Florida, beating him again. But for Czechia, no Radek Faksa again for their forward lines. And then a little bit of adversity for Canada as they lost Sidney Crosby in the middle of the second period, where sandwiched once and then collided with Radko Gudas before the sandwich as well, going to the bench and then hobbling to the locker room for Canada. But then John Cooper said after the game, where he spoke about Sid giving a speech and then them discussing how they don't want this game to be Sidney Crosby's last. And not only was it horrible for him to go down, but what the score was at the time, where Czechia took a 2-1 lead going into the second period against Canada. So that's a whole level of stress. And that's the first time that we saw Canada trail throughout the entire Olympics. And you know what? Every team needs a little bit of adversity for them going into this one. So they passed the test when it came to it. But I know I spoke about a lot when in the first matchup, because this was a rematch of their preliminary round. A lot of those chances that they had off the rush and then below the hash marks in the low slot. Yeah, 3 out of the 4 goals for Canada were scored, but you felt like as if the Czechia defense was doing a better job at protecting the net front. And then Lucas Dostal coming out with wonderful saves for Czechia. And there were, in the Crosby injury, going back to that, there's a little bit of, I felt like Canada had a hard time putting their game together when Crosby was out, because it felt like it hurt the spirits of the team, where we did not see that stone line on the ice for a long period of time. They were trying to figure out who to put there. So there was a time where Seth Jarvis was coming up in the top 6. They were going nuclear with putting Macklin Celebrini and Connor McDavid and Nathan McKinnon together. And Sam Bennett didn't play. And we found out that he was actually ill. And that's the reason why. In the case that a center like Sidney Crosby goes out of the game, this is where, in my opinion, I feel like the balance would have been better for the forward lines to at least put the pieces back in place, and for Canada to be in a good place for their forward lines. But talk about guys who stepped up this time for Czechia who didn't last time. We spoke about Martin Necas and the one-timer spot in the previous game for Czechia, and then him coming up big for them. At least to give them the 2-1 lead at the time. But for this one, when it came to certain times of the game, the times that they went nuclear after a PK or in the last 5 minutes, I felt that John Cooper was relying too much on that line for Canada, and that we really saw how tired they were throughout this. And then in the overtime, we saw Nathan MacKinnon a little hobbled, and that's a little bit of a concern coming out of the Olympics once it's all said and done. We saw it with where there's questions about excuse me, about Fiala, about whether he about that Crosby, and now Nathan MacKinnon possibly there. But also another great story was when Crosby went down, who was the first person that John Cooper called to be upgraded to power play 1? Macklin Celebrini. And getting a goal in this one where a double strip in the same shift by Connor McDavid. One on Gudas, one on Pasternak, and then he sets up Celebrini nicely. Now, Connor McDavid is 1 point away from tying the Olympic record for most points in a tournament. And it feels like it's going so fast for McDavid here. And there was a whole lot of nastiness as well. I feel Canada really got their sticks up high on David Pasternak. He was bleeding constantly. One up from a follow through. Tom Wilson got him really good as well. And after the game, the head coach of Czechia said that they felt like they were playing against 6 guys. But he did not talk about how in the goal that made it 3-2 for Czechia, the one that Andre Palat scored, they had 6 players on the ice. I didn't notice it in live time. John Cooper did it. A lot of the broadcasters didn't neither. It was a talking point online after the game. And that's when I saw the freeze frame, like, oh. And then there were 6 guys on the ice in the celebration as well, and nobody caught it. And here's the thing, that's not reviewable. So that's a big yikes from the referees for that game, whether it's a mix, and it's a mix of NHL and the IIHF referees as well. So inexcusable. But Jordan Binnington, what more can you say about him as far as like doubting him? And made a big stop before the Palat goal on Radko Gudas, and then another one on Martin Necas, a double save where Martin Necas was going to his left, trying the backhand, trying to hit it 5-hole, and then coming up with a stop. Jordan Binnington's career kind of feels Eli Manning-esque as far as a whole bunch of poor seasons and then coming up big when it matters most. And he's been doing that through even going last year to 4 Nations, 2019 for the Stanley Cup. Big game winner is what I call him. I mean, and credit to Czechia because they were committed to those block shots and meeting them at the blue line and then getting ahead of the defense for Canada, which we talked about, the foot speed of Canada's defense. And it bit them on some of those, not only one of the goals, but another opportunity there as well. And then it's crazy because when it was 3-2 Czechia, the one thing I said out loud, this is not over. No way. You cannot put any doubt. You can't doubt the talent that they have on the team, especially with how well they keep the puck. I mean, what were the shots on goal? Like 41 to 22, I believe it was. If I got that on 41 to 24, those were the shots for Canada. Still very controlled, despite the lack of second chances at times. But talk about gritty goals. Nick Suzuki at the end of his shift, getting down, dumping the puck, getting winning it and working it low to high, and then driving right to the net. We're going to talk about another goal that we saw, not in this game, but another, about winning and parking at the net front for a chance for a redirection. And Nick Suzuki has a chance now with the Crosby injury to shift back to center on one of the lines if they decide to keep going with Celebrini, McDavid, McKinnon, which also Seth Jarvis was outstanding in his ability to get in on the forecheck. A lot of guys stepped up. And then Mitch Marner. We spoke about how that Mitch Marner Stone line was not getting a lot of ice after the fact of Crosby getting hurt because they were still trying to figure out who to put together there. Everyone thought that he was going to pass the puck. He's more of a playmaking type of forward. Currently playing center right now for the Vegas Golden Knights. First time that he's really played center since really his days in the OHL with the London Knights. But found a way to drive it up, get Dostal and find an opening, and then scoring to give them the win. And just once again, a lot of comedy there for that, and the fact that especially the mecca of hockey in Toronto that drove him out of town are celebrating him. Just the irony in all of that. And when it comes to Canada's quarterfinal matchup, this is a tough one where great goaltending, great defensive, that great balance as far as high-end players that could score and defensive forwards. This is going to be a really, really tough one. And they might have the more difficult quarterfinal matchup as in relation to the United States. But, semifinal matchup. But USA, they were able to get through their quarterfinal matchup against Sweden despite a late goal to force overtime. We're going to discuss USA's 2-1 win over Sweden next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. And workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inboxes overflowing, and the one position you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, there's a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed sponsored jobs help you reach the people who want to actually fit what you're looking for, skill, experience, and location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And there's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data stats worldwide. If you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all the boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all the boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut the chaos, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help your job get the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/lockedonpodcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast right now, and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hiring? This is the job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Third and final segment here on this Thursday, February 19th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And the third game of four that went into overtime, where the USA got a 2-1 win over Sweden. And the fact that USA, we spoke about their poor starts and great third periods, and then in the previous game, finally getting a good start against Germany, and then for the USA getting the first goal of the game and playing with the lead. That's what mattered for Team USA there. And the fact that we spoke about Nick Suzuki's redirection goal, but Dylan Larkin getting the face-off win, Jack Hughes circling back up, Quinn Hughes sets up his brother, and then he he gets the shot through, and Dylan Larkin redirects it. And also, Quinn Hughes spoke about today about his college experience with Dylan Larkin, because he was a freshman while Larkin was a senior at the University of Michigan, about just how he looks up to him as like a big brother. So it's really cool to see that they connected on a goal, even though Quinn Hughes got the secondary assist on that one. But USA got the control in this one in the first 6 minutes. And then really after that, the USA really had a hard time getting in on their forecheck, as we spoke about how Sweden had a major advantage as far as speed defense there and their ability to win the races to the boards when teams are forced to dump the puck. And we really truly saw that as for a good amount of that early on in the game. That was equal, even though the USA did get to that 6-0 start as far as shots for themselves. But for this one, you think about how Sweden also had a little bit of adversity themselves, because Victor Hedman got hurt in warmups. We did not know this fact until period 2, where everybody and their mother was wondering, why hasn't Victor Hedman played a single shift in this game? But the lineups were already out. And once you submit the lineups, you can't change it. So, and Rasmus Andersson was up in the press box, and that's a defenseman sitting there. So you have to run the 6 and 13 forwards there for Sweden. But USA really started to control as the game went on. In that second period, a 12-8 advantage there. And then Sweden really started to tilt the ice in their direction, which they ended up getting with the goal on that extra attacker, which the seam passes for Sweden, they're some of the best in this whole tournament. And the fact that the USA beat that team, as far as that's an impressive win there. I mean, Lucas Raymond with another assist. He was at almost 10 assists, and he's going home early. Crazy to think. We spoke about how it's mostly if there's a ceiling for seam passes, it's going to come from the back end. But the fact that guys like Jesper Bratt weren't really playing early on in this game, and you could actually look period by period about how certain teams have been given their ice time. So in the first period for Sweden, Jesper Bratt had 0 minutes. In period number 2, he had 0 minutes as well. And then in the third period, 5 minutes, and in overtime, he had, hold on, just looking this up real quick, 39 seconds. So the questions for Sam Hallam about how he was managing the bench, still a major criticism there, and well-deserved there. But one unsung hero that I want to discuss for Team USA about setting the tone physically, Charlie McAvoy. My goodness, was he a force? Setting hits on Joel Eriksson, Gabe Landeskog really early on, really told the opposition that they're not going to be bullied in their own end. And Charlie McAvoy was cleared from wearing the bubble as well. So the fact that he's not going out scared after taking multiple hits to the face from the shot off the puck against Montreal, and then the villainous forearm to the head, it's credit to him for still going out there. And he, during the Four Nations last year, the shoulder inflammation about USA Hockey not taking care of him, thankfully he's all right after that, especially. But there's also a lot of hesitation for Sweden, especially Philip Forsberg, where he had multiple opportunities where he was going to drive the net, and then he chooses to pass the puck instead of go for the shot there. And I think that might have hurt Sweden's chances of winning. But I said that Bratt was getting a lot more minutes. We saw guys like Elias Pettersson, Pontus Holmberg, Elias Lindholm stapled to the bench as the game went on. So, and here's the thing: towards the end, even after Mika Zibanejad tied the game with less than 2 minutes left, they're kind of circling around, but not really getting opportunities on net. And that continued into overtime, where circling around and just the USA not falling for it and not going for a check and getting out of position where it could have been a clear lane to Connor Hellebuck. So credit to them there. And absolute dog, Quinn Hughes, Florida native, Orlando, Florida specifically, getting the GWG. Not only that, but after a whistle, he was telling the bench, Mike Sullivan, he said, I'm going to stay on the ice. I am going to finish this shift. And then for the United States here, getting a key draw, circling near the blue line, gets to the high slot, and then a shot from distance past Jacob Markstrom. Boom. Game winner. As John Buccigross likes to say, winner, winner, chicken parm dinner. And USA's advancing. And just a lot of credit to them. Matthew Tkachuk had a pretty quiet game. But for USA, they were able to get through, and now it's another matchup for them as they're now 2 wins away from the gold medal, which they'll be facing Slovakia. And Slovakia, that was the only game where it was not decided in overtime, where it's crazy how you expect one swing that could possibly happen for one team after Yuri Slafkovsky gets hit in the head on the boards, which I thought was a clean hit, by the way, from Germany. Going to the bench, and then Slovakia scores 2 goals in 33 seconds after that. So, and then right before, during the first period. So, and one of them being Oliver Okuliar, who the Panthers still have his rights, which Okuliar actually talked about after the game, where he's kind of realizes that the Panthers are really heavy at forward and that he's going to have a hard time breaking the lineup, which right now Okuliar is playing his hockey in Sweden. So, but when guys like Draisaitl and Moritz Seider are playing 27, 28 minutes, and then Stützle, he played 22, he only gets 1 shot on goal. That's not going to be enough when your bottom end talent doesn't match up, which we've all underestimated Slovakia and what they can do. And it wasn't the Yuri Slafkovsky show, which is the great thing about the depth. Pavel Regenda getting 2 goals in this one. Once again, Dalibor Dvorsky added again, which he was during the early parts of the tournament as well. And then how quickly they scored, less than 30 seconds into a empty net situation. This is a team to not sleep on. I do think that of USA and Canada, USA does have the semifinal matchup that is less difficult, in my opinion, based on the top end talent and the goaltending here, where they'll be facing Samuel Halavai, while Canada is facing a star goaltender in UC Saros, a balance of lines, which USA themselves has a great balance of lines, where, my goodness, the amount of defensive zone draws that the USA was winning. JT Miller, Vincent Trocheck coming up big defensively. I mentioned the goal from Dylan Larkin earlier. Those guys really made the most out of their minutes in this one. And credit to the USA. I do think that I do expect both USA and Canada to face each other in the gold medal game. But never say never. That's why we play these games, and we're hoping that we see that that's what the world wants, with the exception of people from Finland and Slovakia, when it comes to the gold medal game. But it should be a fun one, and we'll be back with you guys on Saturday. Late afternoon, we'll be coming to you after the bronze medal game. We'll be trying to get a guest to preview the gold medal game and just discuss our whether we are ecstatic about a USA win or disappointed in a USA loss, we'll be back here sometime over the weekend. So we'll be having a show on Saturday and on Sunday after the gold medal game, which is why you won't see an episode here tomorrow for here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But thank you guys, as always, for listening here on the show. And let's go Team USA. Let's hope that they find a way to at least get one step closer to Olympic gold, and maybe a little bit inspired by what they saw from the ladies after getting their overtime win against Canada. Thank you guys, as always, for listening. And in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So Armando Velez signing off. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.